Young Kenyans are ambitious, they're positive, they're keen to shape the future of their country, but competition for scarce opportunities, corruption and inequality are frustrating their efforts. Those are some of the findings from a research project by the British Council that was revealed in the Next Generation report recently made public. Joining me in studio to talk a little bit about this, I have, and I'll start from my far right there, Stephen Mashua, Next Generation Task Force member. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Right next to him is Frederick Muli, who's also a task force member of the same group. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
And right here next to me is Mark Weston, the Director of Research, Next Generation Kenya, and also the author of this particular report. Welcome as well. Karibu sana. Help me understand, and I'll start with you, Mark. Why was there a need for this report, and why at this time?
The British Council has done similar reports in quite a few other countries that are going through periods of great change. And Kenya's great change is the kind of demographic, the youth boom, the youth explosion. So we thought it would be interesting to find out the aspirations of young people as they kind of reach working age, as they kind of swell the size of the workforce, and to try and help give them a voice in policy making, because there's a kind of feeling in Kenya that young people are excluded from public life at the moment. So this is an attempt to give young people a voice in the kind of policies that will affect their lives as they reach the workforce and as they enter adulthood.
Well, shortly we'll be showing viewers a little bit about some of the, oh, actually that's up on the screen already, but what stood out for you? What surprised when you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I never thought youth felt this about this particular issue? Share with me some of your highlights.
I was quite surprised by the simmering resentment of age. It feels like youth are actively I mean, there's a great respect for the elders among youth, but they also feel like they're kind of excluded, and there's discrimination against young people just for being young. I mean, I expected to find discrimination on grounds of, say, gender or disability, which does happen, but there's also discrimination because people are young. It seems like they're not respected, their voices aren't listened to, perhaps until they get a job, set up a family, but that's quite difficult in a context where there's very high unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment.
Okay, I really want to get a lot of engagement from our audience on this. So 22422 is our SMS line. Use the hashtag CitizenExtra, and our Twitter handle, of course, is @CitizenTV Kenya. I want to get your thoughts on this report, and I want to take you watching through some of the findings of that report. If you can just have that up fully on the screen, we'll be able to take a look at that. Okay, so 86% agree that both the heritage and identity of the country are important. Meanwhile, a majority feel the country has made progress in recent decades. So there was some positive feedback in terms of where we are as a nation from that report. More than 1 in 5 Kenyans are between 15 to 24 years of age. Young people have a strong sense of pride in Kenya, and 91% of those surveyed love their country. Okay, that's interesting. Let's surely take a look at the next one. So 78% of those interviewed would marry outside their ethnic groups. Oh, wow, okay. 71% nevertheless also said they were willing to emigrate to other parts of the country, meaning they may not find conditions in Kenya favorable for their growth and so forth. 64% said formal employment did not meet their expectations. I'm curious to know what the expectations are. What are they looking for? While young people believe corruption, a rigged system, are to blame for high unemployment rates. And these are some of the issues young people are concerned about at the moment. They're concerned about lack of opportunities. They're worried about growing social inequality and an education system that they feel is falling short or failing them also. So those are some of them. We'll keep putting them up on the screen. Let me now get reactions also from Frederick Muli, who's also a task force member with the Next Generation. Your thoughts on this study? Does it surprise you? Is this what you feel as a young person is the issues we face in the country at the moment?
Well, yes, and I think most of the findings that we got were very accurate. Personally speaking, from my background, what we found with regards to youth and employment is completely accurate, because we find a situation where 70% of those we interviewed mentioned that their disgruntlement with the employment is when they do find themselves in employment, it's characterized by either its insecurity, the fact that it's an informal sort of job, or it's very temporary and part-time, which for themselves doesn't bode well for their own future and their security. It was also very interesting to find that 2 in 3 Kenyans would rather leave the country in search of job opportunities rather than try and get those that are locally based. And the reason for this is because they believe those opportunities that do exist are either reserved for those with connections, and so you find a situation where young people feel like you don't need higher education, you need higher connection. It's about who you know, not what you can do and deliver. And so the concerning thing about that particular statistic is if we're losing 2 in 3 young Kenyans to other countries and them taking their talents and skills there, what effect will this have on the Kenyan economy? Because I'm very sure it won't be a positive one. So is there a way in which we can create access and increase the quality of these job opportunities? That way, as a nation, we can really reap and achieve our own demographic dividend.
Stephen Mashua, let me get your thoughts as well. Your feeling on this report, the highlights, and any surprises for you?
I think it confirms some of the things that we've been talking about as young leaders, and one of the aspects was something around the sense of optimism that they have in this country, and trying to connect that with their fears about the future. So you will find like the source of disillusionment, despite this sense of optimism, is coming from key pertinent issues like corruption. Yeah, corruption actually appeared as one of the biggest thing, and it was cross-cutting across all the sectors, from education and skills, from aspects of employment. I remember one of the respondents said, like, you have to give up some morals for you to succeed in the country, and that.
Those were the exact words.
Yeah, those.
You have to give up. Okay.
You have to give up your morals for you to succeed
in this country,
in Kenya, and that paints a picture of a generation that is willing to do so much for the country, but then the country is in a way providing a stumbling block, and this could even go further to the level or the extent to which people get access to the jobs that they deserve. And as Fred said, well, actually, it was also a voice of one of the respondents that you actually need higher connection. You don't need higher education anymore for you to be successful in the country.
Basic education plus the right connections will get you anywhere. Is the feeling that a lot of young people have to say?
Yeah, and that's a general concern. Then, if you look at the aspect of participation, we found that 49% of young Kenyans felt like the society doesn't give them a space to participate in decision making. And one respondent actually in Turkana said that so anytime they try to get into the decision making platform within their community, they are told you're not old enough to discuss adult things. And I kept on asking myself as I read through the research, or as we participated in the research process, what are these adult things that we are not prepared for?
Okay, and shortly I'll give each of you a chance to react to some of the things I found rather interesting in the report. But let me come back to you, Mark, and find out from you. The big question now is, so what? The data's out. A lot of surprises in there. What's the end goal of the process that you began when you put this data together?
Well, the end goal is for youth to be more respected, more listened to by policymakers, and to become involved themselves in the policy-making process. So at the launch the other day, there was someone from the Ministry of Youth who said that she is going to use our youth task force that we appointed for the project as her task force, as she's new to the ministry, as she develops policy going forward. So that's a start. And just getting the issue out there on programs like this, making people realise that that it is a problem, that youth do feel neglected, and there are more and more youth, and they're going to be getting more and more. Well, they're going to be getting more and more restless if the situation carries on like this.
Is it a question of youth needing to step up, or adults or the older generation, or being more accommodating, or the law creating ways in which youth, by force must be in certain positions? What is it?
Yeah.
What will make the difference, rather?
I think it's, adults being more accommodating, the community. Young people don't feel accepted, don't feel listened to by the community or by politics. And in fact, we did a study in Tanzania a couple of years ago, a similar study, and young people there felt that the community listened to them much more than young Kenyans feel, and, and that the political process involved them much more than Kenya's does. So there's that. But yeah, you could also, there's a possible argument for actual positive discrimination, so that in government positions or in ministries you have a fixed percentage of young people, as you would, maybe for gender, or in private companies. You reward companies that, with tax breaks, for example, that employ, significant numbers of youth.
Did any of the young people you spoke to give a sense that they have a feeling of entitlement as they talk about opportunities, or were they willing to work hard to get
Oh
to
yeah, they're very willing to work hard. They've got a lot of energy, a lot of creativity. They love their country, and 91% of them say they love Kenya, even with all its problems. They want to contribute. They're kind of itching to contribute, but they feel frustrated that they're not being allowed to.
Okay. I mean, let's look at some of the things that stood out in the report. One of the findings is that a majority of young people feel the country has made progress in recent decades. How did they define progress?
That was what the question was.
Also, in whatever way they looked at progress,
just generally, however they looked at it. But they'll have been thinking about things like employment, gender equality, health, things like that. And you know, on some of those indicators, Kenya's done very well. And educational enrolment was another one that they were pleased with, because enrolment in primary and secondary education, particularly primary, has gone right up. You know, that's a definite sign of progress. But at the same time, quality hasn't kept up with access. So the quality of education is definitely lagging according to young people. It's not preparing them for the workplace.
And that's something I want to come to Fred to talk about. Did they give suggestions on, for example, the Youth One financial programs for young entrepreneurs to be reviewed and redesigned?
Yes.
Did they give suggestions on exactly what they want? So I can just say I want something to be reviewed, but what exactly do I mean? What sort of sense do you get when you hear a statement like that?
Well, I think the biggest concern was simply awareness of these programs, because from the study we found only 9% of those who we surveyed were aware of the Youth Fund and its opportunities. That's a very big problem when you consider this survey was done across the country, across all 47 counties, and you're finding over 4,000 from a group of about 4,000 plus people, only 9% are aware of the Youth Fund, which has great opportunities for young people. They also mentioned that if there's a way that we can sort of tap into young people's affinity towards self-employment and entrepreneurship, and then gear that towards high labor or labor-intensive sectors such as agriculture, which for young people we're not very comfortable with, or we normally hesitate and shy away from. If there's ways in which we can turn and we can match that that availability to financing and sectors which do prove to have high returns, such as agriculture, and mix those two opportunities, and then have the youth in the middle accessing both the financing and the labor itself, then that's a way in which we can really address youth employment and create more sustainable ways for young people to earn a living.
Stephen, I'm glad he's finished on the topic of youth employment, because 64% said that employment doesn't meet their expectations. What are their expectations? What are they looking for?
One thing is we have to unpack what employment means, because we found that a huge number that is employed, they are either in temporary employment, where they are on one year contract, 6 months contract, so they don't have the security. They don't have job security. Then the other thing that was coming out strongly was the fact that someone feels like they are not able to utilize the skills they acquired in school at the workplace. So they kind of feel like they spend so much time in school, right? Gaining skills that are not that are not useful, or that are not applicable in the job market, and that's why you're finding the rush for part-time degrees, part-time master courses, and people are like falling short. They feel like the education system is falling short in preparing them for the workplace.
Is it a question of those in charge of the education sector not adapting to the trends in the marketplace, or is the marketplace not giving feedback back to the education sector that, wait a minute, everyone you're bringing our way doesn't understand what's going on, we have to keep retraining them? Where's the disconnect?
I think there's a disconnect in the mode of communication between the industry and the education service providers, in the sense that there are new and emerging jobs, but who is preparing students for these new and emerging jobs? And I know you're
bloggers, for example.
Yeah, I know you're enthusiastic about social media, for example, or the internet. How many institutions can actually be accountable and say that we've actually prepared our graduates to take up jobs in the e-commerce industry, in the internet sector, the blockchains and all these emerging technologies? Then there's also the question of connection to what the rest of the world is doing. We've been working in isolation to some extent, and that's why we found that a huge number of young people actually recognize social media as one of the spaces where they found so much value in terms of progress for their careers, progress for their lives, connecting with the global community, and learning from their peers in other parts of the world.
All right. Let me come back to you, Mark, and get your thoughts on this. How do you ensure that this information reaches that young person in Marsabit and Turkana until they know? Then you know, they won't be able to act on it. They wouldn't be aware of this data. So if they're not watching this show right now, is there sort of like a plan to get the information out there, the findings?
Yeah, I think there are going to be local launch events. I mean, a lot of young people in places like Marsabit were interviewed for this. So we interviewed 4,000 people across the country, and there's people from every county involved. And we held focus groups in four locations: Siaya, Turkana, Mombasa, and Nairobi, I think. So quite a lot of young people have already been involved in the project. But yeah, we have local launch events to disseminate it.
And of course, you'll excuse me for belaboring the point, but is there like a 1 year, sort of 2 year plan? We have seen a lot of reports being released. I mean, just last week, 2 weeks ago, a report was released by a Dutch firm about exploitation of children, rather. And I asked the same question to them. We've seen these reports before. They come and go. But in sort of understanding what their 2-3 year plan is and whether a follow-up will happen as well, I'm very keen to know a bit about that.
I mean, we're not sure at the moment whether a follow-up will happen, but for example, in Pakistan, Next Generation Pakistan, a few years ago, there were follow-up projects to do. There was a specific one on education, a specific one on employment, looking more deeply, and that carried on for several years. And in Tanzania as well, there was a follow-up on education specifically. So yeah, we would hope to do follow-up projects and also continue the link with the ministry that we established the other day. Keep at them, really.
One of the local dailies has picked up this headline, of course, obviously get a lot of clicks. 78% of those interviewed would marry outside their ethnic groups. Talk to us a bit about that. Nevertheless, 72% reported being worried that ethnic divisions were getting out of hand. When you look at the sort of election mood and feeling we had last year, one would question this sort of data. So if 80% of young people are willing to marry people beyond or outside their tribe, then what happens during election periods?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that surprised me as an outsider. I mean, I live in Spain, so when you hear about Kenya, you hear about all these ethnic problems, and it seems like young people have pretty tolerant views on ethnicity. Nearly all of them said they would be happy to be friends with someone from another ethnic group. Most of them said they would marry someone from another ethnic group. But at the same time, they're worried that ethnic divisions are worsening, and that suggests that they believe the older generation is more responsible for ethnic division. And in fact, we asked that question, and something like 60% said that their parents' generation was had less tolerant ethnic attitudes than their generation. So it seems to be that they...
And you're sure these 78% were telling you the truth, or were they looking at you guys and saying, you know what, let me tell them the yes answer because I'll look better?
Well, I think they were telling us the truth because there are different answers for other questions. So religion, we asked the same about religion. Would you marry someone from another religion? And the percentage was different. I think it was a bit lower
for religion.
Yeah. So yeah, they are telling.
Fred, your thoughts on this one as a young person?
Well, I think
people opening their minds to, for example, intertribal marriage.
Definitely, and even if we look at it within our own generation, I think the whole matter of ethnic division and separation is becoming less and less of an issue. If anything, any ethnic biases we may have may be influenced by maybe our parents or extended family or those in our close proximity at home. The fact that 78% of us are willing to marry outside does say that, yes, we do recognize ethnicity, but it's not a divisive matter for us. Because if we look again to the first statistic, where 91% of us identify first as Kenyans, and then secondly, I believe it was as youth, then it does correlate to the 78%. We see ourselves as Kenyans first, and then eventually we do recognize our ethnicity.
Okay. As Steve, you're the fortunate one with the last word, because we do need to go to a live event. I'll give you a minute just to wrap up this discussion.
Sure. So I'll just basically say that the findings from this report paints the real picture of a Kenyan youth. And some of the pertinent issues coming out of it are, one, young people need to be listened to. The society needs to give a listening ear. And that cross-cuts the aspects of education and skills, cross-cuts the issue of unemployment, and just giving them a platform to contribute their thoughts. And this goes to even our leaders. I know there's a group of young people who presented a petition to the Minister for Youth yesterday about including young people in decision making. This is something that the country can reap a lot from. And I usually ask if by any chance some of the current leaders will be able to survive to see the next generation 20 or 30 years from now, would they be happy about that generation?